I knew he'd be a problem the second he called me kiddo, in front of the entire ops team. I'm 42, I've rolled out 3 compliance frameworks stricter than federal arms control. And this guy strolls in wearing all birds and ego, with a LinkedIn bio that says disruptor, visionary, dad to a French bulldog. First team meeting, he pulled up a Canva slide titled Total Control, Phase 1 and said dead serious, we'll trim the fat, starting with legacy systems and legacy mindsets. Then he looked right at me, like I was some dusty antique he couldn't wait to auction off on Craigslist. Brandon James, freshly promoted Strategic Operations Lead. MBA from somewhere I've never heard of, maybe in a strip mall. He was the kind of guy who printed buzzwords on coffee mugs for morale. Agility is authority, fail fast forward. At first, I thought it was harmless. Another clueless upper middle, who thinks clicking around in Tableau makes him a data guru. But then he started pushing changes. Real ones. Like rerouting vendor access, demanding control of financial sync scripts he didn't even know existed last month. One afternoon, he cornered me at the copier and said, I don't need you to explain how it works, I just need you to hand it over. I smiled, nodded, took a breath. And that's when I knew. Brandon wasn't harmless. He was a toddler with a loaded gun. And someone needed to lock the damn safety. Hey, if you're listening and haven't subscribed yet, please hit that button and drop a like. 97% of people don't, but it really helps us keep telling these wild true stories. Thanks for supporting the team. Now, I'm not someone who flinches when a new boss wants to make waves. I've survived 4 leadership transitions, 2 acquisition attempts, 1 CFO indicted for wire fraud, and a blackout in queue for that nearly tanked a $90 million deal. I don't scare easy. But Brandon wasn't interested in learning. He was obsessed with ownership. That word came up a lot. I want full ownership over ops. Let's centralize ownership. No more silos, just ownership. Except in his mouth, ownership didn't mean accountability. It meant control. Over systems he didn't build. Over processes he didn't understand. Over people like me who knew exactly how fragile the backbone of this firm really was. You see, I didn't just write code. I was the architect of our entire transaction flow. Internal audits, bank syncing, investor onboarding, API leases, fail-safe triggers. Every thread holding the financial web together passed through scripts I'd written, permissions I'd time-gated, systems I'd secured down to the last character. Not out of arrogance, but necessity. The financial regulators we dealt with don't allow loose ends. A single unsynced record can trigger a compliance audit from hell. And Brandon? He was the kind of guy who thought multi-factor authentication was a vibe killer. So when he started nosing around, sending Slack messages like, hey, can I get access to the backend job runners? Or do we really need encryption on vendor logs? I didn't fight. I documented. I flagged. I notified the CFO once, twice gently. She nodded, said she'd talk to him. But nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. I found out he told our junior analyst to copy and paste the database schema into a Google Doc for visibility. That's when I knew. This wasn't just incompetence. It was a disaster in slow motion. And the worst part? He thought I was beneath him. Not a threat. Just the legacy gal. He actually called me that to HR once, like he was being cute. Legacy gal said we shouldn't merge prod and test environments. Guess she's old school, huh? The HR rep laughed nervously. I didn't. I just stared at him. And something inside me started to click. Not panic. Not rage. Just calculation. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to warn him. I just needed to wait for him to do what men like him always do. Overreach. And right on schedule he did. Friday morning. 10:14 a.m. Brandon walks into my office like he owns oxygen, tosses a USB on my desk, and says, grinning like he just solved world peace, delete everything from your laptop. All that work now belongs to me. I looked up at him. Calm. Neutral. A half-second pause so he'd think I was intimidated. Then I said, sure. And started typing. The worst kind of idiot is the one who thinks a title makes him bulletproof. Brandon burst into my office like he was kicking down the doors of some villain's lair, yelling, everything on your laptop now belongs to the company. Delete your access. I'll take it from here. No hello. No preamble. Just a laminated confidence soaked in PowerPoint. He even brought one of the HR interns with him. Lindsay, poor girl, looked like she wanted to vanish into the carpet tiles. She held a little clipboard like this was a hostage negotiation. Brandon was beaming. Giddy. Like he'd just discovered gravity and thought he invented it. I blinked once. Then twice. My fingers paused mid-keystroke. I swiveled in my chair, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "Okay." That single word felt like the quiet pull of a safety pin from a grenade. He didn't hear it. He was too busy talking. Just make sure it's totally scrubbed. And shut down your accounts, access keys, that DevOps dashboard, whatever. Oh, and kill the sync to the cloud scripts. I don't want any leaks. We're consolidating everything through me going forward. Simple chain of command. I nodded like a well-behaved middle schooler, then turned back to my screen. What Brandon didn't understand, what he couldn't understand, is that I don't work off a laptop. I work through systems, frameworks, structures he wouldn't recognize if I wrote them in crayon. The data on my laptop? Ghost fragments. Temporary local shells that act as remote command signals. My real work existed in distributed layers, encrypted, leased, monitored, and secured under regulatory-grade audit protocols. The kind banks sign off on after 3 compliance officers lose sleep over the encryption structure. And every single one of those scripts had a condition coded into them. Ownership expiration. Delete my access without proper reassignment? The system doesn't just freeze. It fails. Not as in broken. There's no malfunction. It's surgical. It simply stops trusting. Like a heartbeat that decides it no longer recognizes your blood type. So I began. Quietly. Precisely. Removed my credentials from the keychain vault. Flagged the sync tokens for deletion under Protocol 7.3. Our own version of a nuclear dead man's switch. Then I signed out of every financial subsystem I had access to, vendor contracts, partner APIs, internal ledger triggers, even the watchdog that flags invoice duplicates. One by one, doors closed behind me. Meanwhile, Brandon was still pacing around my office like a kid waiting for recess. "Let me know when you're done," he said, pretending to glance at his watch even though we both knew it was upside down. I didn't respond, just kept typing. And as I did, I quietly opened a new email draft, attached the full command log, and forwarded it to the CFO with a one-line note. Per directive from Strategic Ops Lead Brandon James, all credential access has been terminated. Full record attached. No commentary. No sabe. Just a time-stamped receipt. You want to strip me of my tools? Fine. But you'll sign the order. You'll own the detonation. By 10:48 a.m., my desktop was empty. Secure wipe complete. No backdoors. No tricks. Just silence. The kill switch had started its work. And Brandon? He clapped once. Literally clapped. Perfect. Send your laptop to IT. Oh, and take a half day. I'll loop you back in once we've restructured things. He left whistling. Something upbeat. I think it was Bruno Mars. Lindsay trailed behind, still clutching her clipboard like it had the 10 Commandments taped to the back. I sat for another 10 seconds, watching the little progress bar complete the final purge. Then I stood up, grabbed my coffee mug and walked out. Dead calm. Nothing left to say. The next move was his. And he had no idea he'd already made IT started 5 years ago. In a supply closet with a folding chair, a blinking modem and a CFO who said, "I don't care how you do it, just make sure the feds never crawl up our ass again." That was my introduction to the firm. No orientación. No welcome lunch. Just a stack of incident reports, a Red Bull, and a spreadsheet so dirty it should have come with a biohazard sticker. We were running multi-million-dollar investment cycles through a Frankenstein of legacy code, duct-taped macros, and a prayer. It took me a week to stop flinching. Then I got to work. What I built wasn't flashy. It didn't look like much from the outside. But it was ironclad. Layer by layer, I rewrote our entire transactional ecosystem, not just for efficiency, but for survivability. Every critical function was wrapped in an audit trail lock. Every API handshake with the banks was time-leased and identity-bound. Nothing was static. Nothing could be transferred without a formal succession protocol that required CFO sign-off, bank co-validation, and a dual-auth token from my side. We weren't just protecting the firm. We were building credibility, trust, the kind auditors don't question, and banks don't hesitate to fund. And all of it, every single line, was built around one core rule. If you don't know what you're doing, the system will assume you're a threat. That wasn't ego. That was compliance. We were managing private equity flows across 3 jurisdictions, all with different reporting cadences, capital thresholds, and export controls. A single unchecked sync error could trigger an AML flag or an SEC inquiry. The last guy who mishandled a quarterly distribution? He spent a weekend in a holding cell for uncooperative data posture. I was in the room when the investigators came. That's why I wrote the fail-safes the way I did. They weren't code. They were armor. And Brandon? He walked into that armor like it was a foam wall at a bounce house. He had no idea that by revoking my access, he'd broken the chain of trust required by our primary investment bank. The bank's systems didn't recognize Brandon. There was no key transfer, no digital handshake, no verificare permissionos que lascen. So the sync didn't fail in the conventional sense. It disengaged. It withdrew, like a surgeon backing away from a contaminated field. By default, that triggers what we called passive lockdown, a silent freeze of all outbound financial syncs until a new compliance lease is validated. Vendors aren't notified.
Client arrêté warned.
It just stops, the way a heartbeat does. Brandon never asked about the compliance clause tucked inside the core module. The one marked CL14_subroutine_failsafe_quiet. He wouldn't have even known how to find it. But it was there, right where it needed to be, waiting. And I wish I could say I felt smug about it, that I was popping popcorn and queuing up the fallout. But the truth? I felt tired. Proud, yes. Bitterly proud. But tired. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. The code wasn't written to punish someone like Brandon. It was written to survive someone like him. And it was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Which meant by the time anyone realized what had happened, the gears would already be grinding to a halt. And the only person who'd know how to restart them was halfway through a chai latte, watching it unfold in real time, with 0 fingerprints on the crime scene. Brandon strutted out at 12:04 p.m., laughing loud enough for the whole floor to hear. He had his blazer slung over one shoulder like a car salesman in a Cialis commercial, and he was telling one of the junior product managers, Taylor, I think, that he was finally consolidating all the back-end junk under one roof. I heard him say the words full control at least 3 times before the elevator doors closed. He even fist-bumped someone. Fist-bumped. Like he'd just finished fixing the national debt, instead of cutting the brakes on our financial engine. 12 minutes later, the first alert came through. I was still at my desk, pretending to finish up a few HR forms so I wouldn't raise suspicion by leaving too soon. That's when I saw the Slack ping from Diane, our director of partner ops. Her message read, "Hey weird one. The bank portal's throwing an unauthorized sync attempt error. Did something change?" I stared at it for a beat. My fingers hovered over the keys. Then I typed, "I'm no longer authorized to assist. Please contact Brandon James." And I hit send. 3 minutes later, a second ping. This time from Covey in accounting. ACH push to Bravo Capital bounced. Error code says trust relationship invalid. Is that on our side? Same reply. Please direct all operational sync issues to Brandon James. Then the flood started. Pings, emails, red exclamation marks in our monitoring dashboard. Transaction queues timing out. Payment retries climbing. The partner side dashboards going blank one by one. No alarms, no explosions. Just quiet, surgical silence. By 12:38, the ledger syncing service went into passive standby mode. That's when I knew the system had fully recognized the break in succession. We were in freefall, and nobody could see the ground yet. I leaned back in my chair, watching the blinking indicators stall. There was no joy in it. No glee. Just this heavy bittersweet ache in my chest, like watching a bridge collapse that you warned everyone about, and now all you can do is pray no one else gets caught in the rubble. I didn't want this. Honestly, I thought he'd at least ask how it all worked before torching it. But he didn't. He demanded the keys. So I gave them to him. And the second he turned the ignition, the engine locked up and swallowed the entire ignition sequence behind it. By 12:50, someone had started a reply-all chain on the ops alias. Brandon hadn't responded. He was probably still swirling his overpriced salad and complaining about gatekeeping old systems to someone who didn't understand the difference between SSO and SOS. I closed my laptop, walked down to the lobby, got myself a muffin, banana walnut, sat in the courtyard, and let the October wind do its thing. I didn't check my phone for a while. Didn't need to, because by now, the CFO would be getting calls. Banks asking why the trust authorization pipeline had shut down without succession paperwork. Asking why the firm's verified architecture signature had been stripped from live systems. Asking, in the politest compliance officer way possible, who the hell is Brandon James? He asked for full control. Now he had it. And the thing about control is it comes with consequences. It hit around 1:17 p.m. Not with a bang, but with that sharp intake of breath just before a storm breaks loose. The CFO, Miranda Walsh, was in a vendor strategy meeting when her phone buzzed. Not her cell, her direct line. The one only 3 people outside the building had access to. She excused herself mid-sentence, stepped into the hallway, and answered. Miranda Walsh. A pause. Then her face changed. No panique. Just a slow narrowing of the eyes. Her spine straightened like someone had run a cold scalpel down it. The voice on the other end belonged to Ellen Keats, our primary compliance contact at First Mid Capital, the investment bank that handled most of our high-volume transfers and international partner flows. Ellen didn't waste time. Miranda, all syncing protocols from your side have been terminated. The system triggered a dead lease override on your Ledger API. It looks like your architecture signature has been stripped, and no new succession paperwork has been received. Miranda blinked. What do you mean stripped? Ellen's voice was flat. The trust relationship has collapsed. From the bank's perspective, it looks like your systems have been tampered with, either internally or by a compromised actor. We've already frozen all queued transfers pending internal audit. We're legally required to, until we receive verified compliance succession from the original architect. Your sync systems are classified as untrusted. I'm sorry. Miranda didn't respond right away. She looked out the window of the hallway, down at the parking lot. Brandon's Tesla was still gone. Of course it was. Understood, she said. Please send a full transcript of this call, and flag it high priority to my inbox. I'll begin internal trace immediately. She hung up, turned slowly, walked straight past the meeting room, and into her office. Closed the door. Then opened her email. She was the one who'd been CC'd on Brandon's little stunt that morning. He probably thought copying her made it more official, like it gave his command extra weight. He'd use corporate speak, of course, requesting asset handover and full termination of legacy system owners' credentials for ops streamlining purposes. And right below it, quietly time-stamped and dry as bone, was my reply. Per your directive, all credentials have been terminated. Attached, list of removed access points and sync privileges. She stared at it for a few seconds, then opened the attachment. 14 access endpoints, 7 security tokens, 3 root systems, all locked, all purged, all irreversible without a succession reauth cycle Brandon never even asked about. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She dialed. No answer. Brandon was still out. Of course he was. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. Brandon, this is Miranda. Call me the moment you get this. I need you in my office now. She clicked into the monitoring dashboard herself, her hands moving faster now. And there it was, the sync dashboard flatlined. Dead air across every financial protocol. Pending transactions in red. Vendor queues aging out. A live timestamp blinking like a middle finger. Curiosity turned to calculation. Then to something colder. Harder. She opened a drawer, pulled out a yellow folder labeled Core Infra Succession Protocol, A Sloan, and laid it flat on the desk. And then she did something very few people have ever seen Miranda Walsh do. She swore. Just once. Under her breath. Because the reckoning wasn't coming. It had already started. Brandon came back at 1:41, still riding the high of his Caesar salad and whatever dopamine hit he got from hearing himself talk. He was laughing loudly about something nobody else was laughing at. A junior analyst was walking with him, nodding too fast, clearly terrified of blinking wrong. Brandon kept slapping the poor kid on the shoulder like they were college buddies who'd just won beer pong nationals. And then he turned the corner and saw her, Miranda, sitting in my old office. Except now, it wasn't just an office. It was a courtroom. 2 folders lay open on the desk, one neatly labeled with a first mid-compliance seal, the other with my name handwritten in her exact, surgical penmanship. She wasn't on her phone. She wasn't typing. She was just sitting there, spine ramrod straight, index finger resting lightly on the edge of the printout like a trigger. Brandon froze mid-step. The laugh dried up in his throat like a puddle under a heat lamp. His swagger stalled. She looked up. Didn't stand. Didn't offer a smile. Just said cool as frostbite. Close the door. He obeyed. Slowly. Still trying to figure out what was happening. Still thinking this was salvageable. As the latch clicked, he forced a chuckle, the kind people use when they think charm is currency. Hey Miranda. What's up? You redecorating? Nothing. Just her eyes. Locked on him like a scope. He shifted, suddenly unsure whether to sit or not. He opted to stand, which only made him look more out of place, tall, fidgety, overdressed for his own funeral. I just got back. Was actually going to follow up on some of the ops stuff, he said, tapping his own temple like a smug parrot. All synced up and streamlined, yeah? Still nothing. Then she finally moved, reached into the bank folder, and pulled out a 2-page printout. This, she said, sliding it across the desk without looking at him, is a notification from First Mid. As of 1:14 p.m., they've classified our syncing infrastructure as compromised. All outbound transactions are frozen. All queues dead. We've officially entered breach territory. Brandon blinked. Wait, what? I mean, that's probably just a credentials mismatch. We've been migrating. She raised a hand. Just one. He stopped mid-word like someone had slapped duct tape across his mouth. She pulled out the second folder. Mine. This, she said, her voice now dipping into something razor-thin and clinical, is a forwarded message from you. Time-stamped. Confirming you instructed the system architect to delete her access and hand over all systems. Without succession protocol. Without compliance continuity. Without notifying me or legal. Brandon reached for the folder like maybe touching it would give him answers. Look, I think there was just some confusion around. Brandon. Her voice didn't rise. That's what made it terrifying. You told her to delete her access. Did you understand what that meant? He swallowed. I thought it was just cleaning up legacy stuff. She said okay. Miranda leaned back in the chair, folding her hands with chilling precision. She said okay, she repeated. And then the system interpreted that as a full revocation of the founding architecture credential. Do you know what happens when a bank's trust system loses its recognized owner without a validated successor? He didn't answer. His eyes darted to the folders again. To the window. To the door. She didn't give him an out. Everything you touched is now radioactive, she said. We're in emergency containment mode. Legal's on their way. And IT is isolating the environment as we speak. Brandon opened his mouth again, maybe to deny it, maybe to ask for help. But Miranda was already standing. And she only said one more thing before she walked out the door, folder in hand. You don't understand the system you broke. And you don't get to fix it now. He stood there alone, surrounded by silence. For the first time in his career, Brandon James wasn't holding the room. The room was holding him. They moved him to conference room 4B, the one with the frosted glass and the sad little fake ficus in the corner. That's where they take people when the walls are about to fall in. The room where exits get negotiated, careers are quietly dissolved, and nobody raises their voice because the legal team is in the building and everyone's pretending this is just another Tuesday. Brandon sat on one side of the table, his laptop closed in front of him like a dead pet he wasn't sure how to bury. He kept smoothing the sleeves of his blazer, over and over, like the fabric might shield him from what was coming. Across from him, Miranda, stone-faced, and Bethany Lynn from legal. Bethany was 5'3", spoke in complete citations, and had the patience of a guillotine. She didn't say a word at first. Just opened her folder and laid a single page flat on the table, like it was Exhibit A in a trial no one was going to win. Miranda didn't waste time. "The bank called," she said, voice cool enough to drop the room temperature 10 degrees. "Explain exactly what you told her to do." Brandon blinked. I asked her to consolidate access. It was a streamlining initiative." Bethany's eyes flicked up. "Your exact words were, 'Delete everything from your laptop. All that work now belongs to me.'" "Correct." Brandon looked like he wanted to say no. Like he wanted to invent some nuanced version of the event where he sounded like a visionary instead of a pyromaniac. But the printout in front of him had the timestamp, the CC line, the full quote. His shoulders sagged half an inch. "Yeah, but that wasn't meant as a literal compliance shift. There's been confusion about system ownership for months. I thought she was just holding on to stuff out of habit." "She was holding credentialed access under a bank-mandated lease," Bethany said, her tone flat and faintly horrified. "You instructed her to revoke it. Without succession paperwork. Without a credential transfer. And without notifying internal compliance." "I didn't know we needed succession paperwork for her access," he said, faster now. "No one ever said there was an official dependency. She never flagged it. I mean, isn't that on her too?" Miranda's jaw tightened. "She built the entire architecture. You didn't think revoking her access might affect the system she designed?" Brandon's voice cracked a little. "Look, I assumed the IT department had backups. I assumed there were redundancies." Bethany cut in, finally flipping a second document toward him. "There were redundancies. All of which were protected by her access tokens, which you instructed her to delete. And as of this morning, your account had not been assigned elevated credentials. You weren't even properly provisioned to access the recovery layer, meaning you were operating under basic admin rights while instructing a total credential purge." Brandon stared at the document like it might blink back. "This is a misunderstanding," he said too quickly. It's a communication breakdown. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was told to start asserting ownership, and I thought." "No," Miranda said, ice in her tone. "You assumed. And now the bank has us under threat of operational trust reevaluation. That's not just a slap on the wrist, Brandon. That's a systemic risk event. That's regulatory reporting. That's investor fallout." He looked like he wanted to stand. Like if he could just pace, he might find a way to spin it. But Bethany's eyes pinned him to the chair. "I didn't delete anything myself," he offered weakly. "She executed the purge." Miranda's reply was a whisper. "Because you told her to." Silence. Even the HVAC system seemed to hold its breath. Brandon looked around the room like someone might jump in with a life raft. But all he got was paper. Cold, damning paper. The timestamp didn't lie. And his mouth, still moving, couldn't talk fast enough to outrun it. The dashboard went dark at 2:07 p.m. Not all at once. More like a rolling blackout, the kind that starts with flickering lights and ends in sirens. The payment gateway queue passed its failover threshold, and with no valid credential anchor in place, the system defaulted to passive denial. Vendor batches timed out. Scheduled distributions to LPs dissolved mid-transfer. A six-figure wire to a partner fund in Luxembourg vanished into escrow limbo. And the investors, they started calling. The partner line lit up like a Christmas tree dipped in gasoline. Every exec who'd ignored my calendar invites for the past 3 years was now dialing into emergency bridges, asking the same question in slightly more frantic tones. "Why the hell can't we move money?" At 2:11, the first internal partner group email leaked to the board. Subject: Urgent, potential compliance breach, freeze on all transactions. By 2:13, Brandon was gone from the dashboard entirely. IT revoked his token and issued a security freeze on his profile. I wasn't in the room when Miranda did it, but word traveled fast. Apparently, she didn't even look up when she said, "Suspend him." Immediate lockout. Let legal mop up. At 2:17, I got the call. Miranda, calm but deliberate. I need you to come in and audit the system. Tell me what can be recovered. I paused. Not out of spite. Just out of principle. Then I said, my terms are LLC billed. Consultant status. Triple rate. She didn't argue. Just said, send the SOW. We'll wire by end of day. By 2:28, I was back in my seat, but now as an outside entity. Same desk. Same chair. But this time the badge said Sloan Systems LLC. I'd incorporated 2 years ago. Quietly. Just in case. I pulled up the infrastructure map. Half the systems were blinking red, the other half frozen in standby. Miranda stood behind me with 2 junior analysts flanking her like medics waiting to see if the patient could still be resuscitated. This is bad, one of them muttered. No, I said. This is contained. You're lucky the kill switch worked. I brought up the audit logs, traced the fallout back to the exact moment Brandon's command propagated through the deletion tree. Every revoked access point. Every auto-expired lease. Every triggered compliance barrier. Beautiful in its precision. And devastating in its effect. Where do we start? Miranda asked. I glanced at her, then at the pile of calls still coming through her inbox. We don't start, I said. Ido. You let me work. You pay the invoice. You stay out of the way. She gave a single nod. By 3 p.m., I'd stabilized the API sync long enough to initiate a read-only heartbeat to the bank. That alone took 3 credential swaps, 2 backend resets, and a security code from a backup key I'd stored in a private archive nobody else knew existed. By 3:19, First Mid responded. They saw my signature. Their system recognized the access. Transaction recovery began. By 3:31, I got a single email from the bank. Re-established trust. Welcome back. I didn't gloat. Didn't smirk. Just typed one command after another, clean and surgical. No guastidmotion. The same way I built it. The room, once Brandon's playground, was quiet now. No interruptions. No buzzwords. Just problem solvers watching a system come back from the dead. Controlled power. That's what it was. Not revenge. Not even justice. Just me, taking back what was always mine. One line of code at a time. The memo hit inboxes at 5:07 p.m. Clean, clinical, and colder than a morgue drawer. Subject: temporary personnel adjustment, ops leadership. Language like administrative leave, active investigation, compliance irregularities. The kind of HR poetry that says we're not firing him. Yet, but he's already gone. No fanfare. No farewell lunch. Brandon's name disappeared from the internal directory by the time the cleaning crew clocked in. Rumor was he sat in the legal conference room for an hour after they told him, saying nothing, just blinking, like someone had yanked the operating manual out of his brain and left the shell. I didn't see him again. I didn't need to. At 5:33, Miranda walked me down to the lobby herself. No assistant. No entourage. Just her and me, side by side, 2 professionals who'd been through the same storm. Only one of us built the boat that still floated. She was calm. A little tired around the eyes. But grateful in that quiet, unspoken way people get when they realize who really held the safety net all along. We didn't talk much. There wasn't anything left to say really. The systems were stabilizing. The banks were placated. The partners were still screaming, but the panic had shifted. Now it was Brandon's legacy on the chopping block, not mine. We reached the elevator. She turned to shake my hand. Thank you, she said simply. I nodded, then reached into my bag and pulled out a small silver flash drive. Unmarked. Smooth. A relic of the old world. I placed it in her palm gently. The full backup, I said. Encrypted. Unedited. Every script, every trigger, every compliance log. It's clean. Verified. And it'll outlive all of us. She stared at it for a second, then slipped it into her blazer pocket like it was state evidence. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. I stepped in, turned, and gave her one last look. No grudge. No triumph. Just a simple truth that had waited patiently for this exact moment. You don't own the work, Brandon. I said quietly. You just triggered the lock on it. And the door slid shut. The building rose around me. And outside, the city blinked back to life.